For the record, I recommended Milo switch to electromagnets before he was debunked. We will now go through the process of designing a motor. At the end of the video, you can decide if permanent or electromagnets are a better choice. We will focus on asymmetry and end effects, because nothing else matters. The end result we are looking for is a motor without voltage or a generator without torque. No equation says you can't have one without the other, so the mysterious concept of back EMF was conceived to link them. Back EMF is a concept like Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy. Santa and the fairy disappear from our thoughts as we mature. Phlogiston and flat earth disappeared as science matured. Today is a good day for back EMF to follow suit. We start with the basic Milo concept and make decisions based on experiments that we can easily demonstrate. A ring of magnets with all the poles facing the same direction interacting with a large area perpendicular field is where we begin. Our idea is new. South poles are up. The large area will produce no voltage based on an equal number of magnets entering and exiting the area of interaction. The discrete edges of the small magnets will give us an end effect to pull against. We ran a test that showed an electromagnet will work. Will permanent magnets do the same? We will run another test to find out for sure. I have these magnets polarized along their medium direction, so this is the way they attract. A few of them together would seem to be equivalent to the electromagnet we previously tested. Sure enough, in reactions with a perpendicular field, with one polarity they move to the left, in the other to the right. The magnets always seek a minimum energy position at one end or the other. It's either here or it's here. Let's call it the cogging or sticking points. Nah, let's be mature and call it by an acronym. MEP, minimum energy point. Mechanical reactions are all masses attracted to a minimum energy point. Equations merely define the strength of the attraction to MEP. We can confidently assume that the attraction to MEP will be the same for electro and permanent magnets. The forces will be different according to the appropriate equations. No wires here. How can there be any back EMF? Maybe it's nuclear, or maybe the Tooth Fairy came in the middle of the night and took the back EMF from my magnets. I am thankful that she left the fundamental forces that attract masses to MEP. I know that steel spaces on the underside of the magnets will help, so I will sneak them in and hope nobody notices. Overhanging rectangular field magnets, like so, eliminates their end effect, but just might move their problem somewhere else. The red force vectors show the problem. Symmetry. Nature might dictate that the sum of the clockwise forces must equal the sum of the counterclockwise forces. The overall effect may have just shifted and changed direction. It's just a theory, so experiments and thought are required before we give up. The sum of counterclockwise and clockwise forces equaling zero seems like a tough obstacle to overcome. A skeptic would say energy must be conserved. I say the sum of the forces must equal zero is probably a law of nature. Isn't that Newton's law? Let's check if the vectors are right. No revelations here, just a concept to be stressed. Symmetry is entirely different from magnets and iron cores. Rotor magnets will pull on one end of a permanent magnet stator and push on the other. With an electromagnetic core, the rotor will pull on both ends. No magic. And with a piece of steel, the pull is obviously on both ends. Asymmetry powers motors, and the asymmetry is surely different for permanent and electromagnets. The question here is whether canceling one of the undesirable forces will give us some free spin. If we predict wrong, we can blame it on back EMF. We can compare permanent and electromagnet options using FEA to see if there are any hidden traps. What do you think? It looks to me like the permanent magnet stator weakens the flux density in the rotor magnet. That might be bad. The electromagnet looks like the better option, but a magnet motor may be the only way to make the nasty back EMF concept disappear once and for all. The permanent magnet seems to be prone to more repulsion, so the electromagnet might make more sense. Shouldn't reducing repulsion with an electromagnet decrease the undesirable torque and yield asymmetry? If natural law is that clockwise and counterclockwise forces must sum to zero, then the downward force on the right would increase to compensate, and the net torque would still be zero. Newton taught us that the sum of all forces in all directions must be zero. The single stator here is asymmetrical and exerts useless forces on the shaft. Shaft forces are zero when all forces are coupled to produce torque. Clockwise and counterclockwise forces were just a theory. With maturation of this technology, that theory must disappear. Newton's is the law of nature that applies. I guess we will need to bring out the sledgehammer to handle this problem. Let's eliminate the end effect problem and the forces on the shaft. We will cover the entire ring with two stator magnets. Shaft forces should be zero, and Newton's law is obeyed only if we have torsion from y-direction forces at 90 degrees from our favorable reactions, as shown. Net torque is yielded because moment arm for the x-direction forces is much greater, about 7 times, than the moment arm for the y-direction forces. We would need an external torque to stop the acceleration. This design is based totally on the concept that mechanical work is based on masses seeking minimum energy, and the sum of the forces equals zero. Will a magnet experiment show us the MEP at 90 degrees is torsion? Answers to other questions first. We started with the constraint of a ring of magnets and applied forces that we knew existed, and we addressed the issues one at a time. These magnets would be very expensive, plus 3,000 pounds of thrust still needs to be addressed. I won't build this contraption just to prove that back EMF is a myth to skeptics who will then say I need to make them a viable product before they are convinced. Murray proved that the fundamental idea of two small torques opposed by a much greater torque was the secret to free energy. Few people have heard of him or of the originator of the back EMF theory. The bottom line may simply be, starting with the constraints of a ring of magnets and a permanent magnet stator, this may be a unique solution. An electromagnet option might be the only variation that would also work. I believe an electromagnet would be much cheaper and just as convincing, in spite of resistive losses, but I am not a skeptic. Do I have torsional MEP? Of course we do. It should be obvious in the illustration with the square stator blocks that the magnets seek MEP, aligning end to end. Here is the MEP at the 90-degree reaction points. The magnets twist and are much easier to disengage at this MEP than at the earlier MEP shown.